Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of our series, the Senior Companion Program. Let's get started with some housekeeping notes. All lines are on mute and will remain on mute throughout the duration of the call, which means that if you have questions at any time, please let us know in the Q&A pod. If you're having technical problems, you can let us know in the chat box, making sure to send it to all panelists and attendees. You can also use the raised hand feature if you're having technical issues, and our webinar producers will help you out. Today's audio is being broadcast via phone and online. If you're having issues with one way or the other, I do recommend trying the other way. And then finally, today's session is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, you can disconnect at any time. The slides and the recording will be made available on the competition page. And with that, I welcome you all here today again. My name is Ann Ochi. I'm AmeriCorps Senior's Senior Program Officer for Training and Knowledge Management, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Debbie Truchon, who you will see in the Q&A pod answering your questions. I did want to just have a caveat. If today we don't get to your question or after, reviewing in a couple of days, the resources that we have, you have some confusion, make sure that you send an email to the mailbox on the screen, 2021 FGP SCP at cns.gov. And then you'll also see the link to the competition website. Today's session is session 3 of our 5-part series. We'll be back the rest of the week tomorrow for a very exciting call where we talk about best practices in budget development. We'll be joined by some of my colleagues in the Office of Grants Administration. And then we'll end up the series with a session on submitting your application into eGrants. So we'll start with another preliminary. If you've been to our calls, a couple of poll questions for you. First up, we want to know a little bit more about you. If you have received a federal grant before, including one from AmeriCorps or CNCS. And while you're filling out that poll, I will just say, Bruce, I see your question, and I'm going to actually hold that for the end. So just want to make sure that you can, that you know that I've seen your question. All right, thank you for filling out that poll. Looks like the majority of you have received a federal grant before. For our next question, how well do you know AmeriCorps Seniors, formerly known as Senior Corps? Give you a couple more seconds to fill that out. All right, looks like a little bit of everything here. For our next question, how would you describe the primary field of your organization? And if you could, just choose the one that most resonates with your organization, because I know some of you might fall into a couple of these categories. All right. Most of you are in aging. And then for the next question, how did you hear about us? All right. And then for the last question, have you attended any of our other webinars in this series? Awesome. Well, thank you for participating in our quick little poll. We will move on to our agenda for today. So on the screen, you should see our agenda. It's our goal that by the end of the session, you will understand if the AmeriCorps Senior Companion Program is right for you and are able to develop a realistic, complete application for the grant. Before we dive into the heart of today, we'll go over some competition basics. We'll go over what the Senior Companion Program is and how it works, and then we'll get a little bit more practical, talking about national performance measures, focus areas, and funding priorities, and we'll look at some program examples. So we AmeriCorps Seniors are currently accepting applications for the AmeriCorps Seniors Foster Grandparent and Senior Companion Programs. And you can apply today, should you want to, but at any point from now to 5 p.m. Eastern on February 3rd, 2021, 5 p.m. Eastern. For this competition, we are looking to expand into the geographic service areas that are listed on a document we call Appendix A. On this map on the screen right now, you can see a color-coded map of the open states. In red, you will see the states for which there are opportunities for the foster grandparent program. In green, you'll see the states for which there are opportunities for the senior companion program, which we'll be talking about today. And then in blue are those states where there are opportunities in both programs. Here is a screenshot of the Senior Companion Program Appendix A. It's a table which shows all of the open funding opportunities. We'll talk later about how you will propose what you and your organization would like to serve. I think I saw a question about that in the Q&A pod. Just know for now, Appendix A is an important document. This is just a snapshot, of course, on the screen. So if you go to our website and click on it, you'll see all of the states and those counties. Some other resources to get you through the application process: the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, that establishes the competition and application requirements. It's your gateway to the competition. We've got grant application instructions, which are a step-by-step guide to navigating eGrants. And we'll actually be taking the grant application instructions into something a little bit more visual in session 5. We have Appendix A, which I've talked about, Appendix B, which explains our national performance measures in depth. And then we have the work plan development worksheets, which will be helpful to you in trying to think about how to plan the activities that your volunteers will be doing. And then finally, we have the frequently asked questions that we do update throughout the process based on the questions that come into the mailbox. All of these resources are available on the 2021 FGP SCP expansion homepage. So if you were to go there today, you could find all of these resources, and that's also where you would find the recording. So currently we have session 1 and session 2 up, and you can find them on the competition website. So that gets our basics out of the way. We'll dive into the AmeriCorps Senior Companion Program itself. And again, we hope that we give you enough information to assess if the opportunity is right for you, and to provide you with the resources to build a realistic application. So what we've got on the screen here is a lot of text, but it is important because it talks about the regulations that establish this program. This is written into the law and shows the purpose of the Senior Companion Program. There's a dual purpose of engaging individuals 55 and older, particularly those with limited income, in volunteer service to meet critical community needs, to provide a high quality experience that will enrich the lives of the volunteers and the individuals that they serve. These programs support AmeriCorps senior volunteers in the Senior Companion Program and provide supportive individual services to help older adults keep their dignity and independence. That's the purpose of the program. So there are a few things we can pull out and talk about. I've talked about that dual purpose of engaging individuals in service to their community, also providing a high quality experience to the volunteers themselves. And then there's a second part, which is the specific purpose of focusing on volunteers with limited income. And we'll talk about how that plays out. But finally, providing support of individualized service to help older adults remain independent and in their homes instead of having to pay for more costly out-of-home care. So those 4 principles combine to create the Senior Companion Program as we know it. We'll start by thinking about our volunteers a little bit. Anyone over the age of 55 may serve as a Senior Companion volunteer. However, those individuals that fall within our income threshold are eligible to receive a small stipend for their service. That stipend right now is set at $3 an hour, and those are the volunteers that count towards your BSYs, what we call volunteer service years. There are other potential cost reimbursements as well, like supplemental insurance, meals, transportation, recognition. Many of you probably have questions that ask, what do you consider supplemental insurance or transportation or recognition? What counts as income, and how do I go about getting this checked? And we have resources that can help you. 2 links are going in the chat right now. One takes you to our Manage AmeriCorps Seniors page, and one takes you to the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. This is the page we use to give operational resources to our current grantees right now. So there's a lot of information there, but I do want to draw your attention to the program handbooks. Our current grantees use this to manage their grants, and it's got answers to hopefully just about any kind of practical operational question that you can think of. These are public resources available to you right now to check out. There are even some tools and templates in the handbook. So this is a great resource for those operational questions. But there's another thing that you can do, and that is to use the Code of Federal Regulations itself. So 45 CFR 2551, 45 CFR 2551 is the portion of the Code of Federal Regulations dealing with the Senior Companion Program. This is the official rule book for the Senior Companion Program from the federal government. Many of you who are current grantees are familiar with this, but it's a series of questions with answers. And when you apply for the program, you are agreeing to abide by all of these rules. So if you were interested in learning more about income guidelines that govern the eligibility for a stipend, you could click on this question 2551.43. I can read numbers, and it gives you the answer to say what income guidelines govern the eligibility for a stipended volunteer. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat from Tiffany and from Joe asking about specifics of determination of volunteer benefits. I do recommend that you go to that, the Code of Federal Regulations that I just shared, 2551.43, but also in the handbooks, Tiffany, you'll see we have a template in the back for income eligibility that you can take a look at to see what some grantees use to determine income eligibility. So we know a little bit more about volunteers. let's move on to volunteer stations. If you look at the Code of Federal Regulations, you will find a technical definition of a station. I like to just simplify it and say it's where your volunteers are going to be serving. This is often, or these are often, organizations that we see partnered with assignments, beneficiaries working with the grantee on an assignment plan, providing any necessary orientation and training for that assignment, and providing supervision and reporting it back, making sure volunteers are safe and secure. Common examples include pretty much any organization that has access to a client population that needs this kind of support to remain independent. This is what the Senior Companion Program is all about. Often, those are organizations who are external to the sponsor, and those organizations are bound by a memorandum of understanding. They don't actually have to be the sponsor or the grantee or the organization that is getting the grant to serve as the station. And you can find more resources and information in the handbook and the Code of Federal Regulations. And when your volunteers get to the site, what will they be doing? So on the screen, we have another screenshot of the Code of Federal Regulations. This one is 2551.71. And this has the criteria here of what is an appropriate senior companion assignment. And you can see again, question and answer format, which makes things a little bit easier to kind of grasp. There's a lot of text on the screen, but it allows direct services to one or more eligible people that results in person-to-person supportive relationships with each client support at the achievement and maintenance of highest independent living for their clients, and are meaningful to the AmeriCorps seniors volunteers in the program. They are supported by appropriate organization training. Senior companion volunteers shall not provide services such as those given by medical personnel, large number of clients, custodial services, administrative support services, or other services. The focus is really on that person-to-person supportive role, and we are looking at that one-to-one, person-to-person service opportunity. So we shared these terms in an earlier session, but I always like to refer back to them because we get questions about the differences. Really important for knowing how our programs work. Sponsor, we use it interchangeably with grantee. That is the organization that receives funding and is legally responsible for those grant funds. So the organization who's submitting the application to this competition. And then there is another set of organization, if you will, the station, the community partner, or your organization. It can be your organization as well, but the place where those volunteers will serve. I like to show illustrations of the concept. So here's a program model. This would be the example of what a senior companion program that focuses on multiple issues or maybe has multiple partners would look like. So you can see AmeriCorps, the agency, AmeriCorps Seniors grants funds to the sponsor. And then the sponsor recruits volunteers and places them at places external to their organization, versus on this next slide where the sponsor is also the station. So we, AmeriCorps, give the funds to the sponsor and they recruit volunteers and place them within their organization. Both are common. So we will now move on to performance measures. This is a little hint if you were here at our last session, but I've got a question for you. Why do we measure performance? Why is it that AmeriCorps, the agency, is interested in performance? And I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to answer that in the chat, making sure to send it to all panelists and attendees. Why measure performance? These are all good. Meaningful use of money for future, oh no, I lost it. For future projections and planning, to know whether you are being successful, to see outcomes, to know how you're doing, to see its impact, because Congress and taxpayers require it, Alan. To determine if we meet our desired outcomes, create evidence that our programs are working. These are all really good. To ensure good financial use of federal funds, make corrections on the way, to ensure funds used are meeting criteria set. Yes, you all have got it. The effectiveness of the grant, impact, accountability. All in all, we are a federal program, and as a result, these programs are paid for with taxpayer dollars, and we take that responsibility seriously. We are all stewards of taxpayer dollars here at AmeriCorps, the agency, and if you receive a grant for the Senior Companion Program, you too become a steward of taxpayer dollars as well, and that comes with certain responsibilities. Like Alan said, the responsibility of assessing your impact, to know how you are doing and how to hopefully improve, to use that information to make the greatest impact on, that you can. So why do we measure performance? It's those things we just talked about: accountability, improvement. It also helps identify things that can be replicated or scaled up or done elsewhere. I think Deb mentioned it, but if we see in Georgia, there's a really cool project that we're able to measure and scale and do elsewhere, we want to be able to do that. It helps us tell the story of service. The national performance measures, the system of measurement that we are about to talk about, are a uniformed system. And we can compare not only how senior companion programs are doing throughout the country, but we can compare it to the other AmeriCorps seniors programs and to the other programs like AmeriCorps State and National and Vista around the world or the country. And that is why we measure performance. And that's why it's important. So as I already alluded to, the specific system that we use to do that is called the National Performance Measures. It's a very uniform set of measures. You'll look at a menu of measures, and everybody in this national service community uses some version of those measures that allows us to measure and assess your effectiveness and communicate it. They are made up of a number of different components. We're going to walk through all the different components of a performance measure. It's kind of like a pyramid. So they start off broad down here at the bottom with the focus area, and then they get more specific as you go up that pyramid. So we'll talk about each of these, starting here with focus area. So while the agency has 6 focus areas and the key goal of capacity building, applicants to the AmeriCorps Senior Companion Program must identify healthy futures as their focus area. Healthy futures is actually the only focus area for the Senior Companion Program. Objectives are general categories within each focus area. In healthy futures for the Senior Companion Program, the 2 that are available are aging in place and access to care. And then we get into the specific measures. Those are reflected in output and outcome. The way that I like to differentiate between the 2, and I'm sure if you're a grantee, you're tired of me using this example, so I need to be more creative, but output is like a seed that you plant, and then the outcome is a flower that blossoms for from that seed. So you're going to work with a certain number of individuals, but most likely, most of the time, not all of those individuals are going to achieve the social outcome that they're looking for. So the people we work with, that is the output, and the number of people who experience that change is the outcome. On the screen, we've got an example with the output H4A, the number of individuals served, and the outcome H9A, number of individuals who report having increased social support or improved capacity for independent living. On this next slide, we've got the definition of a national performance measure work plan. It is a work plan, or a work plan in general is a specific part of the application. It's kind of like a table. It's pretty structured. It mimics a logic model. Any work plan that results in a national performance measure output and outcome pairing, so like H4A and H9A, would be considered a national performance measure work plan. On the screen here, we have a screenshot of the work plan development worksheets. I like to highlight these because it's a tool or a resource that you can use excuse me, a resource that you can use in developing your performance measure work plans. I've alluded to this in our calls, but the work plan is a specific part of eGrants, our electronic grants management system. It's a specific part of your application. They're built and structured and constructed, and it's not a narrative that you can just kind of copy and paste into and write what you want. Instead, you need to provide specific information, and it correlates with these columns that you see on the work plan development worksheet. So if you're someone who likes to draft ahead of time and then copy and paste your draft, I definitely recommend using the work plan development worksheet to help build your work plans. So we're gonna switch gears and think back to Appendix A. You get to propose the funding amount that will best allow you to meet the needs of your respective geographic service areas. So regardless of the funding request, all applicants are required to follow the calculation of 1 VSY for every $6,500 in their funding request. VSY being a volunteer service year, and that is how we count stipended hours of service. So 1 VSY for every $6,500 in your funding request. Thinking back to session 1 where we had our fictional state of Verona and these counties, Montague and Capulet counties, the organization was going to propose 40 VSYs to meet their community needs. Multiplying that by the $6,500 gives the maximum amount that they can request, which is $260,000. So that is the maximum amount of funding that they can request if they wanted to have 40 VSYs, 40 volunteer service years. Further, to be in compliance with the conditions of this NOFO, for every $6,500 in annual base federal funding, so for every $6,500 that you request, at least 1 VSY, 1 volunteer service year, must be placed in work plans that result in national performance measure outcomes in the Healthy Futures focus area. That's confusing, so I want to say that again. So for every $6,500 in annual base federal funding, at least 1 VSY must be placed in work plans that result in national performance measure outcomes in the Healthy Futures focus area. So in our example where we have an organization who is proposing 40 VSYs, the max amount of funding that they can request is $260,000. because that's the max, so 1 BSY for every 6,500, they would have to program those 40 VSYs into work plans that result in national performance measures outcomes in the healthy future focus areas. Now, I did see some questions that asked, well, what if we wanted to do something in the other community priorities work plan, which if you've gone through Appendix B, you'll see that's the only other option that you can have. Let's use this example again with the 40 VSYs and 260K that they're requesting. Let's say the applicant wanted to request the same amount of money, $260,000, but wanted more VSYs. You can do that. Let's say 45, for example, but still just requesting that $260,000. They would still need to follow this phrase that is on the screen: for every $6,500 in annual base funding, 1 VSY in the Healthy Futures. But because they're requesting 5 additional VSYs, but no additional money, those remaining 5 VSYs could be placed in the other community priorities work plan. So I hope that helps the individuals who had that question in the Q&A pod. But we can talk about that more once we're done if that's still confusing. On the screen, there is a screenshot of Appendix B. So our performance measure instructions, and what you'll see at the beginning, you've got a table that shows the objectives and the corresponding outputs and outcomes for those objectives. And then later in the document, you will see definitions of those key terms. So thinking about our 40 VSYs with $260,000, when it came to allocating those volunteer service years on the application, you can make multiple work plans. In this example, we just have 2 work plans where for the H4A, H14 combo, they programmed 25 volunteer service years. And for the H4A, H9A combo, they programmed 15 of their VSYs. I always like to point out that something that's counterintuitive about our system is that when you look into eGrants, when you're doing your application, you're actually not going to see VSYs as a column or as a field. What you're going to see is a field that says unduplicated volunteers. I need you to know that unduplicated volunteers for the purposes of your application does equal VSYs, and that is not intuitive. I understand. So if you see unduplicated volunteers in the system, think volunteer service years. In both the foster grandparent and senior companion programs, we're counting hours and not people. So that's one quirk that I wanted to make sure to mention. And so then I'll ask you all, and I know I saw a question about this in the Q&A pod, but what determines a successful application? You can add that to the chat, making sure to send it to all panelists and attendees. What do you think? What determines a successful application? A clear plan and the means to carry it out. Okay, that's a good one. Any other ideas? Realistic budget, output and outcomes, a track record in other AmeriCorps program management. Good plan, clear logic model, reachable deliverables. Answer the questions, commitment, attainable outcome. These are all good. Where you can find the answer is the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So on the NOFO, the screenshot is from page 10, where we can find the application review information. So we give you the specific criteria that our reviewers will use to evaluate our application. This is primarily what determines a successful application. And then we provide some more detail about what those mean. So you can see the strength of your work plan is an important part of that. Also the way that they reflect the National Performance Measure instruction. So it's really important to take the work that you want to do, the impact that you want to see, and translate it into AmeriCorps Senior's Senior Companion Program, so to speak, translating it into our performance measures. So that concludes our prepared content for today. I know we got a lot of questions, so we'll start going through the Q&A pod. I'll remind you, if you've got a question, please make sure to add it to the Q&A pod so that we can answer it. So I saw a couple of questions that asked this, whether or not you could have multiple outcomes in a work plan. So you can only choose one output outcome pairing per work plan, but you can have multiple work plans. So yeah, and when you go into the, actually Mike, if you could go back to slide, let's see what slide number this is, sorry. Slide 30. So on the work plan development worksheets, so you'll see column C says service activities, and you'll see on Appendix B, we have multiple service activities that fall under a particular output outcome pairing. So if there was many different service activities that you wanted to do, most of your work, you could have multiple work plans that have the same output and the outcome, and then the difference would be the service activity that the volunteers would be doing. So I've seen some questions about the VSY versus unduplicated volunteers. So a VSY is a volunteer service year. One VSY actually equals 1,044 stipended hours of service. When I say that one VSY equals an unduplicated volunteer for the purposes of your application, that is because when you are filling out the work plans in eGrants, you're not going to see a VSY field. What you'll see is an unduplicated field, unduplicated volunteer field. Now, how that works out in practice is up to you and your organization. In some cases, one VSY could equal one volunteer. But in some cases, multiple volunteers can equal one VSY, one volunteer service year. Depends on the minimums and maximum amount of service that the volunteers that you have at your organization serve. And that is probably confusing if you're used to the RSVP model where one unduplicated volunteer truly does represent one person. I saw a question and I can't find it, so I apologize. It had to do with service activities, and I want to say that it was Carol who I saw that wrote it, and now I can't find it. But if you go to Appendix B, let me see if I can pull it up. But on Appendix B, the performance measure instructions, it lists all of the service activities that correlate with a particular output and an outcome. So you'll select it from a drop-down menu, actually. And before I forget, Bruce, I know you added this in the chat earlier. You asked a question, which was a really good question about match. And I think you were referring to how the agency had waived match for fiscal year 21. So while AmeriCorps, the agency, has issued a match waiver for this year, we do encourage applicants to show how they will support their programs by budgeting their non-AmeriCorps resources as they are able. And please excuse my typing as I pull up a document to share with you. And folks, if you could, when adding questions to the chat or the Q&A pod, make sure to send it to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see. I saw a couple of questions about COVID-19 and what programs have done to adjust. Into the chat right now, I'm adding links to a couple of resources that you can take a look at. The first one is a resource that was given to grantees called The Path Forward for Senior Corps Programs in Service. And then the second document that I'm adding is called AmeriCorps Seniors Performance Measures COVID, and it shows how grantees kind of, or how you can make a COVID specific work plan. And I was just using air quotes when I said that, and you can't see that. So just so you can get that visual. Oops. So this first link is to the Path Forward document. And this second link is to the performance measure for COVID. And all of these are these resources you can either access from the competition page. You can also access it from the Manage AmeriCorps Seniors page that I referred to earlier that houses the handbooks. Folks, you can continue to add your questions to the Q&A pod. There was a video that we were going to show. Mike, can you pull that up while I go through the remaining questions that are in the Q&A pod?
She is more than just someone I do errands with.
He's more than just a companion. He's a friend.
She's more than someone who needs reminders.
She's more than a client. She's my friend, and I enjoy being with her.
She is definitely more than someone that just drives me to my appointments.
She's a friend. I learn a lot from her. She's just a great companion to be with.
She's like a daughter.
She's like family to me.
She's someone I love to laugh with.
I'll just take him out for a drive in the country and be in a natural setting.
She's the reason to get out of bed and get moving.
When we're out and about and doing things together, it's just something I really look forward to.
I take her to doctor appointments, but we do so much more.
Without her as my senior companion, I wouldn't be able to get out of my house.
You can help make independence a reality. Join Senior Corps Senior Companions at seniorcorps.gov.
Thanks. All right. Moving on with some other questions. Sorry, these are going fast. Can additional volunteer stations be had? So you can have more than one volunteer station. It's not required. You can also only have one volunteer station if that is what you would like. So there are no required number of volunteer stations. Again, you're also not required to have external to your organization stations. So you can have stations that are you, the organization, getting the grant. You can also have partnering organizations serve as stations as well. I saw a question, can we add additional outcome instruments to the survey specified? So you can, yes, you can add additional outcome instruments to the survey specified. So for VSYs, those volunteer service years, that only counts stipended hours of service. So while you can have other senior or what we call non-stipended volunteers, only the service of the stipended volunteers counts towards your VSYs. I saw a question about geographic service areas, and now I can't find it. Just a couple of things that I've been making sure to share about geographic service areas. You get to propose what you want to serve, what is reasonable for your organization. So I always like to use the counties that I live close to, so Fairfax County, Loudoun County, and Arlington County, Virginia. If your organization wants, you can propose to serve just Fairfax. If your organization wants, you can propose to serve all three. So it's really up to you and what is feasible for your organization, and also what you think you will be able to have the most impact in. And along with that, you get to propose the number of VSYs and the funding request. There was a question about the PSA. Yes, the PSAs are being done to reflect the new AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps Seniors branding. I don't have a timeline for that, but I do know that it's happening. There were questions that I saw about results, and now I can't find it. I apologize, folks. These are coming in quickly, so trying to keep up. I know I saw a question that asked about the success of our programs, or I think at least that's what I think it was alluding to, the results of the program. For our volunteers, we had some work done in a longitudinal study a couple of years ago that talked about, or that looked into the benefits of service. So I definitely recommend checking out our longitudinal study results. You can get that from the website. I think I've addressed these outcome questions. So again, you can only have one output and one outcome per work plan, but you can have multiple work plans. The budget and funding related questions I'm going to hold till tomorrow's session. Like I mentioned at the top of the hour tomorrow, we're going to be joined by a colleague of mine in our Office of Grants Administration. This is the first time we're doing this type of training, which is really exciting, but she is going to walk us through the budget and give best tips from a grants officer perspective. perspective. So very exciting. Hope that you're able to join us tomorrow. If you're not able to join us, the session will be recorded, so you'll get to watch it after the fact. The 10% match has been waived, but we do recommend that we encourage that you show us how you will support your programs by budgeting non-AmeriCorps resources as you are able. Reports are done annually and semi-annually. So semi-annually, you just tell us about outputs, and then annually you report on outcomes. So I saw a question about standard size of population area for 40 VSYs. 40 is just the number that we have been using in our examples. You can definitely propose less than 40. We really want you to propose what is right for your organization and for your community. Keep adding your questions to the Q&A pod. I saw a question, can we change VSYs from year 1 to year 2? So if you remember, we had that quote that talked about for every $6,500, you must have at least one VSY in the National Performance Measure work plans. So as long as that applies, you can adapt your you can adapt your work plans as long as you still follow that threshold. I see some questions asking for links. Let me add this really quickly. So the link that I'm about to add to the chat right now is the competition webpage, and that addresses the questions asking for various links. So from here, you can get the work plan development worksheets that people are asking about, and you can also get the NOFO and the operational and financial management survey. And the NOFA. Will today's link work for tomorrow's webinar? Yes. And if you registered for today, you should still get an email tomorrow, or maybe today. You'll get an email about tomorrow's session that you can click on. Any lasting questions? I've seen a couple of questions about beneficiaries, and I apologize for whoever added this latest question. I'm not sure what the original question is, but we don't dictate how many beneficiaries you need to serve. For the folks who are talking about indirect cost rate, bring that question back tomorrow. I was just speaking to my colleague, and I know that that is something that they are going to address, and I would prefer that it came from her and not me. So come back tomorrow with your indirect cost rate question. If you can't make tomorrow's webinar, it is being recorded and it will be added to the competition webpage. For those of you asking for the frequently asked questions, you can get there from the competition webpage, but since I have it open, I can add a direct link to the FAQs. Just give me 1 second, and I'll add that to the chat. Here's the direct link to the FAQs. All right, and then the last question that I will answer for today has to do with Appendix A. Just reiterating again, you get to propose what you wish to serve. So if it's just one county, you can propose to serve one county, or if you want to serve multiple counties, you can propose to serve multiple counties within your application. You do not have to be in the county that you're proposing to serve, but if awarded the grant funds must serve the county that you're applying to serve. So I hope that helps to clarify those few questions I saw. Thank you all for sticking with us for this past hour. That went by pretty quickly. Again, I highly, highly recommend if you can tomorrow, come tomorrow afternoon to check out our training on the budget development. If you can't, it is being recorded. There's a quick survey on the screen before you leave. Thank you so much again for joining us today. And if you can't make it tomorrow, we'll see you the following day for the last of this series. Thanks for learning with us, folks. Have a great afternoon.